Hello, hello, hello to my beautiful parenting and noir tribe. It is Alicia coming at you after a bit of a hiatus. Life has been lifing, adulthood has been adulting, and I've been occupied in any number of directions of late. However, I have been compelled to come in front of you all and share a bit just simply as I was preparing for a YouTube live that I was participating in as a panelist for a friend here who's based also in San Miguel de Allende, Mexico. And as a part of that preparation process, it got me to thinking about my expat why, some of the reasons why I have personally taking this journey that I've been on since September of 2024. So just about 8 months now. Um, for many people, the reasons why they decide to make a choice like I did um, can be multi-layered. It could be sometimes people feel like they're escaping something. For other people, they're running towards something. For some people, they are built with more of an adventurous spirit and they like travel. They like new adventures. They like new things. And so living in another country may or may not be a big deal for them. For me, it is more of a coming to terms with who I am and the things that I have wanted to do, I've envisioned doing in my life, and then being very active in terms of doing those things. So, um, hopefully that YouTube live will come to you all that I'll be participating on in a future date. We all had been all set to record, and amazingly, San Miguel de Allende is a place that doesn't get a lot of rain, other than during the rainy season, which is traditionally around mid to late June into about mid-September-ish. And so that's the time when you're going to get relatively regular rain that occurs. Outside of that, you don't get a lot. You may get a trickle here or there, but there are many, many, many months of dryness. And so we have been in the dry season essentially throughout this time. And tonight, as we were filming the live, we had a major, major thunderstorm accompanied with lightning event, power blinking, all sorts of things. And my two colleagues who were joining for that live, their power went out. And so mine blinked for a bit and my internet went down, but it came back. And so we have had to put a placeholder in terms of that conversation. But it was going to be around the topic of women being expats sometimes and going and visiting other parts of the world or moving to other parts of the world, more importantly, and our various reasons why we do that. And so I didn't want to lose the momentum of what I had been preparing in terms of my thoughts and my perspectives related to that. For me, my journey is still my journey. And while it feels really, really new and early for me, it's becoming more common as the months go by. And so for anyone in this place of thinking, and I know that there are a lot of people who are considering options outside of living in their country, especially people who are in the United States. And so I'm trying to provide one perspective. I always recommend people do your research, go to the internet, go to YouTube, look at videos, put in expat, whatever your country is that you're interested in. Go to Facebook, join groups, whether it's just regular travelers around the world, Black travelers around the world, if you happen to be Black. Um, Look at specific locations and join those groups and those communities so that you can start to hear from people on the ground what they're living and what they're experiencing. But if it's something you're thinking about, you can take my perspective as one perspective, but do your due diligence in terms of really trying to figure out places that you might be interested in and some of the perspectives of people who live there in terms of the good, the bad, the indifferent, and all the things in the middle. And so waxing a little bit nostalgic in terms of thinking about my journey because I will be a 1 year expat here in September. So we still have a little bit of time, but I recognize that as of next month, it will be 1 full year since I both quit my job of a decade and started my consulting business. And so I'm amazed that again, time has passed so quickly and the things that cause me a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of worries about should I do this? Is this going to work? Um, being here, about to celebrate that anniversary, is an amazing place and space to be in. And so that helps in terms of me thinking about my ultimate expat journey. As many of you may or may not know, I took the leap in addition to quitting my job last June, in addition to creating my business solo practice last June. I started thinking about, okay, well, if I'm doing all of that, I might as well do it big and do many other things at the same time, which I may or may not recommend because it takes a lot out of you to do simultaneous big things at the same time. So take it from me, if you can do things in measured steps, one thing here, one thing there, live through it, regroup, go to the next thing. I do recommend that. But if you're like me, who likes to take on a lot of things at one time, um, keep listening. But at that time of having done those things and recognizing that I was no longer tethered to a job, I was no longer tethered to anyone's expectations of me in terms of me clocking in or asking for vacation time or asking for relocation privileges and things like that. I didn't have any of those concerns. I was a free agent, so to speak. And so one of the many things at the top of my list in terms of my number one reason for thinking about the expat life is that I love traveling. I've always loved traveling. From the time I went to college and started doing road trips with friends, and I mean local to different cities in the state where we're in, traveling to other cities and states along the East Coast and other parts. That was my first introduction to really doing a lot of travel because my family, we didn't do a lot of that as I was growing up. And so it was always exciting for me to see new places and have new adventures and meet new people. And so that started at that point when I graduated and began traveling internationally and meeting new friends through graduate school and jobs who talked about the places they lived and suggestions for places I should go to visit, I was like, sure, why not? And in our 20s, not having a lot of bills, hopefully, not a lot of responsibility, and perhaps having pretty decent jobs. It was a wonderful time for me to travel the world in different countries, and I really felt enriched in doing that. And more importantly, I started to learn because I wanted to travel economically and I wanted to travel often instead of staying at ritzy hotels and doing that sort of thing. I was like, huh, let me rent apartments. And so this was probably pre Airbnb. So I was online looking at guest houses and things like that. And so staying very locally. And so getting more of a feel for a city or a community within a city because I'm embedded in an apartment in that particular place versus being in some ritzy hotel with turn down service. And so that helped me to get a little bit closer to the ground within the various places that I visited, getting to know people kind of in the day-to-day walk, whether I was going to the market or going to the local coffee shop or whatever. And so that would always stoke for me a desire because I would have random conversations with people and really asking questions about, well, what should I do now that I'm in the city and where should I go and what are some of the best places to eat? And so again, that trigger in terms of learning about different cultures and different ways of living always did something for me. And so from that experience, it always stuck with me this desire to see kind of the global perspective around things and less so, just where I was from or where I happened to be at that moment. And so another aspect I think of my life journey in terms of getting me to this expat space that I'm in is that I always wanted to study abroad. If I'm being honest, I think I read a lot of books as I was growing up, a lot of novels that were set in different places, and it always made me fascinated to hear about those people in print. And so when I got to college, I briefly looked at study abroad opportunities, but at that point, first generation college student, I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't have the wherewithal, I didn't have the, I guess, mentors or the champions to say, oh, no, 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 you can do this, you can do it economically, or you can do that with support, getting funding or things like that. I didn't have it. And so I would stare at the different glossy study abroad manuals that I got and I would fantasize about doing it. But again, very finite. Scholarship covers this, assistantship covers that, that sort of thing. I didn't know how to make my money extend And so that was kind of a long held fantasy that I had. But it was a real one. And I was very, very excited about the notion of being in another country. But like I said, it was something I kept tossing around, even as I started working, even after my graduate degree. And again, meeting people in those different places, it still did not feel attainable. I would do a couple of quick kind of searches and kind of go a little bit into the process, but ultimately would have a stopping point because it just didn't feel realistic for me, despite the fact meeting people who sometimes look like me and were doing it. So a lot of my thinking ultimately was really circular. I would travel, be fascinated with a place and say, huh, maybe I could live here, but that would be it, and then I'd be back to work waiting for my next adventure. So, just that desire to see the world, to live somewhere, to do it in a way that for me felt like study was the vehicle, never, "Oh, I'll pick up and just move and maybe get a job there," or at that point, there wasn't a lot of opportunities, at least I knew, in terms of remote work, so that was never a possibility for me. So again, lots of desires, but on a very low ebb in terms of how to make it work. Um, Fast forward, life happens. The birth of my daughter, living, working, moving from the DC area back to my home state of North Carolina to be with family, and kind of going a bit smaller in terms of my perspective versus the global perspective, but still having that desire to travel, see the world, figure out how to bring my daughter along. Was a developing aspect for me. And so I was really excited when she was about 2 years old getting her passport, and I was really gung ho for us to begin taking trips. And so once we got back to North Carolina and being there and kind of formulating where we were going to go, fast forward to the COVID pandemic and pretty much putting the halt in terms of any aspect of life, travel, ease, feeling like you can commune with people and do all the things out in the international streets. And so I it took me for a loop there. I was like, I don't know what to do, but unbeknownst to me, the COVID pandemic was actually a gateway. It was an opening for me that I didn't recognize I needed. It actually was a game changer in the sense that it showed me that in my solo parenting journey with my daughter, we could live and operate and function as a unit by ourselves without physical support. Because a lot of the effort for me in moving back to North Carolina was to be close to family, but more importantly, to have that physical support. With COVID and all the restrictions, that put an end for quite a number of months to people having those sorts of interactions and things like that. Um, and so it allowed me to see that once you strip everything away as a parent, trying to make a life for you and your child or children, you can do it. You can do it in a way that you figure out, okay, when we strip away the babysitters and the grandparents and the friends and all the things, one on one, you can do it. And so for me, as I said, it was an unexpected blessing because it unlocked the code for me in terms of the self sufficiency that while I knew I had it, I hadn't put it into practice in any real meaningful way. And so um, I'm thankful. If there's anything to be thankful for that pandemic, I'm thankful for the fact that it kind of gave me my big girl pants um, at a time that I didn't recognize that I'd even had them in my wardrobe. Um, but on the flip side, the pandemic was it also ratcheted up my stress level. It was ridiculously stressful trying to figure out how to keep yourself alive, try to keep your child alive. At that point, she was in daycare, had to make a tough decision around keep her in daycare, bring her home. It wasn't necessarily a decision that was easy to make and one that ultimately my hand was forced. I had the blessing of being employed with a company that I didn't lose a job. In fact, we added more work because we do health research funding. So we added all sorts of new programming related to COVID-19. So in addition to our regular day jobs, we got a layer and two or three related to COVID and having to pivot and serve the needs of our different clients and awardees. And so that was a very challenging time where I had to solo parent without that physical support that I just said was a blessing on some levels and still functioning and being present for my daughter and making sure she was okay. And so all of that starts to wear you down. And from 2020 on, and this kind of the perennial level of stress of being a high performer at work, being whatever the people needed at that time, whether it's what I needed or not, does start to wear you down. And so ultimately, I think that work burnout that was simmering and then going into overdrive during and following the pandemic. Was a major thing. Then moving into health problems, because at some point your body will let you know when it's not okay, when it is not happy, when things are breaking down. You can pretend for as long as you want to, but at some point, physiologically or mentally, you're going to start to see the cracks in the dam. And for me, that's what began to happen in 2021, going into 2022, followed by a surgery that I had to have in 2022 that led me to taking some time off, but then coming back to work and feeling like, oh, I have to prove myself. I've been off. Let me do above and beyond. But luckily, if I take a step back in terms of that period of time, I started exploring again. I started fantasizing and thinking about, well, if I wasn't here, where would I be and what would I want to do? And that led me back into the thought of international travel and being different places and spaces. And so I started to be more in tune with that fantasizing and dreaming out loud. And ultimately, during that time period, I came across the Exodus Summit. It was on Facebook. It was a group for Black women who were interested in travel or relocation, sabbaticals, and all sorts of things. Joining that group and then hearing about their summit in the fall of 2022. And that was one of those things, and I remember the title, it was like Move Abroad Money, and it wasn't necessarily about per se moving abroad, but it was giving you the tools and the skills for you to have that work freedom, that life freedom, that financial freedom. And so hearing panelists, women who look like me, Black women who were living it, who were doing it, or who had done it, and giving and imparting their wisdom around the process and really very practical steps and tips into how to do this. Where do you want to go? If you could go, how will you fund yourself when you're there? There were many people who were single. There were families. There were older folks. There were people who were single parents with children. And that was an eye opening moment for me. That was a reality where I actually saw myself in other people. And I recognized that if they could do it, I could definitely do it. And so I think that was one of those times where I was like, again, as they say, open the aperture a bit. That's when I started to get a deeper perspective, and it was no longer fantasizing, but recognizing that there were realities here that I could tap into. After the Exodus Summit, I joined another group called Burnout to Bliss, created by one of the founders of the Exodus Summit for women who wanted to find ways to have sabbaticals from their jobs, whether they were short term sabbaticals up to a year long or whatever, and really concrete ways to figure out, do you have that allowance in your organization? How do you work it? How do you prepare your finances to do it? And again, being surrounded in community. And that's an important piece for a lot of my story is community. Being surrounded by like-minded people can ignite a fire in you that may have been simmering. You may not even have known that there was flames to be ignited. You start to think differently because you're in different spaces, you're having different conversations, you're having different perspectives coming at you. And so for me, that was critical. Being in a group that told me if you need to take a break. And for me, as I said, from that 2021 to 2022 period was starting to be a bit of a breakdown for me physically, that I recognized the warning signs were there, the check engine light was on, and I needed to figure out what I was going to do about it. So it was giving me concrete steps so that I could say, all right, well, let's think about what you need and then start to put the plan into place. And so that was super helpful. Another part of my expat journey story around this time is the value of healthcare. If you are privileged to be employed, self-employed, have health insurance through the marketplace, for instance, and you have mental health benefits, I implore you, find a therapist. There's so much stigma around therapy, especially in the Black community. I think it's lessening nowadays, especially now post-pandemic, for a lot of our new generation. And I'd love to see it when young people talk about my therapist this or my that, in relation to being centered around their mental health. It is a critical aspect, and I'm so thankful that I've been plugged into that journey for many, many years in terms of having therapists. But the game changer for me, just like the Exodus Summit, was at that time period when I was starting to truly go into the red, having both a Black female primary care physician as well as a Black mental health therapist. And both of those women were alongside me, and they saw things, they saw warning signs that I didn't see or that I wasn't ready to attend to. And they were gently but persistently trying to give me notice about that. And for me, I didn't necessarily, I wasn't ready to pay attention. But again, life comes at you fast. And so around early part of 2023, I had to have a follow-up health procedure. And at that time, I ultimately made a decision based on the surgeon saying, "Oh, yeah, you'll be fine. You'll just be out a few days. And because you have a sedentary job, taking a few days off work, you'll be fine." Well, unfortunately, as we know, the body is very finicky and fickle. And so I was thrown for a loop with that surgery. That surgery was actually much more intense than my previous surgery in the fall of 2022. And unfortunately, at the time, my, direct supervisor was also on leave. So I do that wonderful thing that many Black women do is we shoulder the burden. We're like, "I got it. It's okay. I can do it." And so physically and I was not okay, but having to show up virtually for work and do the thing and feel like I needed to shoulder the team and things like that ultimately equated to me burning out mentally because of the physical toll and the pain I was experiencing and still having to soldier through because I felt like, well, if you're next in line and the person who's normally in charge isn't here, you've got to be that person. No one told me that. So for you ladies out there who are wearing the cape, often you've put that cape on. There is no one who has told you to do the things, to be the superhero in this story. So my caution is take that cape off because if you don't, you might die in it. So for me, and I am not trying to be hyperbolic there, it's real. Sometimes us and our desire to be overachievers equals absolute burnout. And if you're lucky, you can come back from that burnout, as I did, but it comes at such a cost. And so ultimately, again, my doctor at my checkup, my therapist waving the big red flag, like, nope, you're done. You need to get out of here. And because of them and their words, and me finally being at such a bottom that I was ready and willing to listen, I took a leave of absence, thankfully, understanding from my Burnout to Bliss group how to do that, from other ladies in Exodus Summit, how to do that, to take the time I physically and mentally needed to get myself together. Because again, as I said, I'm a solo parent for my daughter. So if I go down, who's there for her? If I'm a shell of myself, who's there for her? And so ultimately it was beyond me and it was about her. And so thankfully for me, taking those 12 weeks off work literally were the shift in the universe for me. It changed the atmosphere, it changed my mindset. It made me recognize that again, if I didn't take care of myself, if I didn't value myself, and if I always put work first, I wasn't going to be here for my child. And my daughter's under age 10. I lost my mother when I was almost 9. The replay of all those things for childhood traumas of the place and space of who and what you could be or would have been with your parents and things like that. I didn't wish that agony on my daughter, and so I had to decide to make different choices. And so again, to this day, I'm so thankful for my doctor and my therapist because those Black women saw in me what I refused to see, and they saved me and my life. So ultimately, um, another big piece in terms of that time period of being away from work, because once you can not focus on the day-to-day tasks you have to do, again, you start to dream out loud. You start to, again, ask yourself who and what you want to be. And so as a part of that, I had to I had to start thinking really seriously about, do you want to continue here with this job that you've had for almost a decade, solid, stable, you have been there since day one of the programming, all of those things, you've put your name in, in the roles of the organization. Is that it? And ultimately I realized it wasn't. I wanted to be happy. I wanted to be functional. I wanted to be present for my daughter. And so that meant I had to do things differently. And so from that time on, I started making very concrete steps in terms of preparing to leave my job, setting aside aggressively money, talking to my financial advisor, looking at bills, trying to figure out what debts I had that I could eliminate in advance, and then ultimately making the decision to give my notice to leave my job. And so, fast forward to June of 2024, as I said, that is when I walked out the doors of my organization, knees shaking, scared because I had a dream of what I wanted to do next, but I didn't know how that was going to work. In my mind's eye, I was like, okay, let's save up, expenses for 6 to 8 months, give you enough to figure it out, and then you go from there. But it wasn't enough. Having that major step that for many of us will stop us in our tracks and we would struggle to do doing that, I was like, and then what's next? I'd already been thinking about creating my consulting business, having conversations with people about what would it look like if I had this type of organization? Is it something that would be a benefit to you in the greater community? And so you do as much research as you can, but at a certain point, you have to jump. And so I jumped and I created my health consulting business. But as I said, I like to do a lot of things at the same time. And so going back to the beginning of the conversation, I recognize I didn't have anyone telling me what to do or where to be at a certain time. And so that desire that had been stoked through the Exodus Summit and all those conversations with women and all those travels that I'd done of, low key relocation kind of scouting, I started to really lean into it. And so at the end of June 2024, my daughter and I came to visit San Miguel de Allende. First of all, we had gone to Mexico City around February of last year as well. We both love Mexico City, but if anyone knows, Mexico City is like on steroids. It is a big, massive city, lots to do, lots of moving parts, lots of a lot. For me, DC girl of my adulthood years, that appealed to me because I was like, oh my God, literally out our door, we can have this and that, and we can get to every park, and it's a major international city, so we'll be a hub for all sorts of travel. So it ticked all the check boxes that I would have had. But I had to pause and say, well, number one, you're Spanish. You had Spanish in high school and a little bit of college. That Spanish has not been used since then. So let's just say you don't speak Spanish. So the notion of being in a city that massive with my daughter, not necessarily being able to speak the language, but more importantly, not being able to create community again, was important to me and a point of pause for me. Also, lovely city, elevated, lots of pollution, lots of traffic, lots of a lot of things that can make life hectic. And I had to think to myself, if you're creating a life of ease for yourself and your child, is this really going to do it? Or are you just going to trade one source of stress for yet another source of stress? So I had to be really honest with myself and thinking about that. And so I stumbled across Michelle Wedderburn, who is the host of the panel discussion that we were going to do tonight. And Michelle was a vet of San Miguel. She'd been here for a number of years and was here with her young son. And so when I started looking at her content and seeing the magic of San Miguel, the beautiful pink parochia, and the cathedral, and the nice square and the cobblestones and all the beautiful buildings and things like that. And I was like, wow, that looks magical. And hearing her and how much she loved being here, I was like, nah, can't be that good. So I was like, all right, well, let me just try for myself. And more importantly for me, in addition to my daughter getting travel under her belt, I wanted her to be a front seat passenger in this particular car I was driving in the journey, because I needed to see the world through her eyes and not just mine. I can fall in love with a place, bring her, and it absolutely doesn't fit any of the things that she as a young one would need. So when we leaned into our scouting, we came to San Miguel, and it happened that when we came the first day, the very next day, they were having a Black San Miguel group meetup. And so they do these monthly meeting at restaurants and other venues and just bring in whoever wants to in the community. I knew nothing about anyone here, but I had joined the group, a month or 2 before, and I was super excited about joining, and so I take my kid, virtual strangers to the city, literally not knowing where to go, but still getting there and going to the meetup, and it was wonderful meeting, a group of individuals. Some of them were, expats who had moved here, some had been here for a while, some were new, others were like me, they were scouting, and just having conversations and kind of the wonder of the place and perspectives really ignited something in me. And it's again not an exaggeration to say that there's a feeling here in San Miguel. It genuinely is a feeling where you almost audibly breathe because it slows you down. It's a city that is just, it hums almost. There's a vibrancy to it, but it's very, very nurturing, very peaceful, and you feel that within a few days, and from all the stress, all of the burnout, all of the anxiety I had had in terms of my life up until that point, to go somewhere and to visibly sigh was something. To see my daughter look around and be like, "Okay, this is kinda cool, I like it." And going to parks and doing things with her, doing school scouting tours with her, getting her perspectives, and then finding what would become our current school, and her going there and sitting and talking to the girls as I'm talking to the teacher, about the school and things like that. I saw her eyes light up because for her, a place isn't real until she makes friendship circles or just even a beginning level, buds of friendship. And so to see her sitting there calmly chatting with the girls that were there that day, it did something for me, and it gave me a sense and a purpose and a belief that maybe, just maybe, this is our place. So I have to emphasize again the value of YouTube and Facebook groups and making connections with real people in those places, because if you don't do it, you may stumble around and you do the touristy stuff, or you do the, well, they say in this city, this is what you do when you're here, and that not be enough. So I highly recommend making those connections, having those conversations, asking the questions that you may not know need to be asked, and understanding again life from people who are living it. So ultimately, after the visit in June of last year, I was in. I was like, you know what? This is the time that if we're going to do it, let's do it. And so I began the process of dismantling my home, um, getting things ready for sale or for storage, getting the house ready because I was like, I don't think I want to hold on to it. I think I want to sell my place. And so that took a massive effort. And so you can't necessarily be present with your emotions because you're busy and you're in motion. Um, and so that was a hectic time. All of last summer, I was moving, planning, planning. And one can argue that if I'd stopped, would I made the same decision? My thought is yes, but I would likely have felt less like I was jumping onto the plane when we actually left in September of last year. But it it was just like, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And I think for me, the thing is that when you are an expat, you have the full recognition that you have a family, you have friends back at home, you have a community at your back. It's not a one-way door. It doesn't have to be a one-way door unless you want it to be. And so going somewhere and recognizing you don't know what you're going to encounter when you get there, but if it doesn't work out, you can always go back home. And so that was the energy, the wind beneath my wings, if you will, in propelling me forward, because I was like, if this doesn't work out, there's no failing in this. It is a lesson learned. And so that's another aspect of this is don't think of it in terms of if we do this and we fail, then no, people are gonna laugh at us. Or they're like, you shouldn't have done that. I told you so. You've got to be honest with yourself and say, this is what I want to do. We're going to try it. If it doesn't work, we regroup, We retrench, you do whatever, but don't take it as fail success, but more of a life experience, a learning experience. So ultimately, went all in, house selling, job, even bringing the car last fall. Like I was in once we got here. And ultimately, if I'm being honest, I think I read the political tea leaves a little bit. I think I kind of thought we as a country might be here. I didn't think we'd be here the way we are. But I had a sense that maybe maybe it would turn out the way it did. And ultimately, in living with my daughter, I didn't want to be in any part of a place where I felt oppressed. I didn't want to worry about her. I didn't want to worry about me. I didn't worry about safety. I didn't want to worry about what's going on, losses, jobs, all sorts of things. I wanted to be somewhere where I could breathe, literally and figuratively. And so this move in advance of last November's election was some of that thinking I had in terms of where it could go and deciding that I wanted something different for us. And so ultimately, it comes down to me wanting a better quality of life for myself and my daughter. I wanted a slower pace. As I said, safety. Safety is big for me and us. I wanted her to go to school and to feel that I'm going to pick her up at the end of the day. I'm not going to get a call about a school shooting or something else. That could be irrevocable in terms of life's loss. I wanted warmth. I wanted friendliness. I wanted a community. I wanted to be in a place and space where I felt that if I saw someone and say, "Hey," I may see them again in the market or the grocery store and start up a friendship. And that has been something I found for me and for us here in San Miguel. That's our story. That's how we're here. It has not been easy. I will do another video where I talk about some of the highs and lows of living here in San Miguel, some of the highs and lows as a first time expat, because there are a lot. You cannot begin to understand if you've not lived in another country ever, you can't begin to understand just the cultural shifts. I don't care how warm and welcoming the community is. There are very literal things that you don't know about another place. It could be bills and how they're paid. It could be how things are accessed. How do services work in terms of people doing repairs and timeliness and all the things that you're so on autopilot because it's all that you know in your home country, your city, your state. All the things you take for granted become very real when you don't know the customs and the culture. And so it is a lot in that first month. I've said to many people, I had a mild to moderate headache probably almost every day because I was actively thinking, using my brain in a way I've never had to. And so I don't want to take that for granted. There's still stressors. There's still things that I work through work wise. Developing a new business is hectic. You're constantly kind of in the churn process, especially in this first year of trying to secure clientele. So it's not all sunshine and all that good stuff. It's not. It is day to day, just like it would be day to day in the States. But I think what I have traded here is again that slower pace, that peace of mind, walking out of my door, being seen as a human, a woman. I'm a Black woman, yes, but it is not met with, oh my God, why are you here? And ugh, you don't belong here. None of that. It's more like, oh, okay, there's one in real life. So there may be a little surprise or just like nothing because it's just day to day and it feels good because I will accept that versus unwelcome stares or frowns or things like that. And also that stress, that anxiety, my again, health issues, blood pressure, headaches, all the things, they don't happen because I don't have the unrelenting expectations and concerns and all the things that I was doing back at my home in the States. I don't have that here. And so there are blessings here. And so for all of the inconveniences, all of the, lost in translations type things that I may deal with, I find peace here. I get to spend more time with my daughter. I get to be more present in terms of conversations with friends and even talking to people. They'll be like, "You sound different. You sound calm. You sound at peace. You don't sound either super high and anxious or very low and kind of monotone." And those are the things that you necessarily can't trade. And so I challenge you, if you are considering this, give it real thought. I don't recommend anyone run and jump into this because it is a lot. Um, and it does take decision making, especially if it's not just you. If you're bringing a spouse or children or parents with you, it takes a bit. And so I would say do it in as much of a reasoned fashion as possible. But in some instance, turn that fantasizing into practical planning and research. As I said, join the Facebook groups, join the YouTube um, channels of people who have similar interests or backgrounds or experiences that you are seeking, and learn from them and really lean into what you might learn or develop from those relationships. And you'd be surprised. And if nothing else, go on some fun scouting trips. I recognize that having leave may be a luxury and you may not have a lot of time, but sometimes piecing together holidays where you have a day or two here or there, adding that, making it a long weekend, that's a start. And sometimes that's at least good enough for some people, but if you can, unless you're that type of person, maybe not go into it blind, um, but recognizing there's a wealth of resources or calculators, guides, all sorts of things if you're worried about the money. Um, but I will say, make sure you have a plan. Make sure you do have finances to come with you, because unless you are planning on working in that particular country, you still have to live and support yourself. And you, again, don't want to have the constant stress around money and funding the life that you live in a whole new place as one of those things. But ultimately, this is a beautiful journey. It is one that I look forward to seeing how it progresses over time. I look forward to seeing how I continue to grow as a person. I look forward to seeing how my daughter grows and matures in this place. I don't know how long we'll be here. Um, that's not important to me now. It is just being present in the moment and giving it all the tries and all the chances and all the time that it needs for me to feel at peace and ready for the next thing. The next thing could be next year. It could be the year after, who knows? But for now, that's where we are. And as I said, um, it's beautiful. It's messy. It's not always what I want it to be. There are days when I'm angry because something's going on and I'm like, oh, I don't like it. But I still go to bed at night and breathe a sigh because my life is contained. So enjoy, live life, and be present wherever you choose to be. Thanks, guys. I ask you to like this video. If it has reached you, please consider subscribing to my channel. As I said, I have more content that I will provide and look forward to engaging with you all in the future. And if you have specific questions about me, my journey, anything about San Miguel, please put them in the comments below and I'll be sure to respond back to them. But again, I hope you all have a lovely, lovely rest of your week and be well. Take care.